Welcome to another episode of Pobsa's Dharma Lounge, a place and time to relax and explore all things Dharma. In this episode, I'll be addressing the question, is Buddhism a religion or what? Hi, Pobsa Frank Jude here, and I want to take some time to thank those of you who have been messaging me and about the podcast. And again, if you'd like what you're hearing, if you think this is something worthwhile and you want to support the show, the best ways you can do that are subscribing, clicking likes, leaving reviews where possible, and commenting. I'm also open to hearing any suggestions for future shows. And of course, there's always the opportunity for Dana, and the links to Dana will be in the episode description, as always. So, for years, people have debated whether Buddhism, and in particular Zen Buddhism, could be considered a religion. But such a debate actually ignores the fact that the very concept religion is a Western one, and that applying it to Eastern thought and practices is technically an anachronism. The fact is, the ancient yogis didn't have such a concept as religion. Certainly, since the colonial period, Buddhists, Hindus, Taoists, and others have internalized and incorporated the concept and now generally think of their beliefs and practices as religion. In fact, during the cultural imperialism of East Asia and the missionary fervor of Christians, Buddhist monks began to argue that Buddhism, in fact, is a more rational religion than Christianity, and thus more aligned with the scientific revolution. But that story is for another day. The debate among Westerners as to whether Buddhism counted as a religion, or should it be more accurately thought of as a philosophy, a way of life, all of that centered around the central importance of theism in the Western conceptualization of religion. A non-theistic religion sounded like a contradiction in terms to many Western theologians and philosophers who believed that God, or belief in God, was central to religion. But again, this merely represents the very cultural-centric view of Westerners, and it's reflective of the monotheistic history as evidenced in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Richard Gombrich, in his book Theravada Buddhism, A Social History from Ancient Benares to Modern Colombo, tells of a Buddhist monk who told him, "Gods are nothing to do with religion." Since the very beginning, traditional Buddhists accepted the existence of gods, many gods, as being great beings, seen even as capable of granting worldly boons, such as success in a business or in a pregnancy, but who themselves were not omnipotent nor omniscient, and none of these gods were seen as a creator. In fact, like all other beings, gods are understood as being part of samsara, one of the 6 realms depicted on the Wheel of Life, and thus even the gods were subject to birth, decay, and death. For Buddhists, religion has always been of a soteriological purpose. It's a matter of proper understanding and practice, with the ultimate purpose being the attainment of liberation, seen as the complete eradication of greed, hatred, and delusion. And then when that state of awakening is attained, the cycle of samsara is transcended in the realization of nirvana, which is seen as the only phenomena that is not transient nor conditioned. And with the cycle of samsara fully transcended, such an awakened person, a Buddha, will never be reborn, and thus will never have to die again. As Gombrich makes clear, for Buddhists, religion is what is relevant to this quest for salvation and nothing else. Buddhism is one of the three great yogic cultures to arise in India, and all yoga is functionally and purposefully soteriological. And I think it's interesting to note that the Latin word religio, from which we get the word religion, means to bind back. And yoga suggests a yoking, a uniting. So both religion and yoga are really concerned with shaping a specific way of life that leads to liberation. And both religion, understood as practice-oriented, yoga, both point to actual practice as central to this goal of liberation. Gombrich suggests that such a religion is primarily one of belief, but I actually question that perspective. I think that's wrong. I think it's more accurate to say that the only belief needed is one that at least agrees with the potential of the yogic hypothesis that the human being as generally thought of and life itself as commonly lived is a state of delusion and bondage, and that it is indeed possible to wake up to truth or reality, known as Dharma. Now, rather than the blind faith that is encouraged by Catholicism, for instance, all that is required is a kind of trust or confidence that leads one to be open to testing the suggested practices in order to see for oneself. Actually, Buddhism is much more concerned with orthopraxy than orthodoxy. Praxy, practice, doxy, doctrine. All right? So it's much more concerned with orthopraxy than orthodoxy. Unlike in Christianity, where schisms were historically the result of differences in belief, doxy, doctrine, schisms in Buddhism were based upon differences in practice, praxy, praxis. For instance, monastics from different doctrinal schools of Buddhism would often live and practice together as long as they shared the same vinaya or code of behavior. Gombrich goes on to distinguish soteriological religions from what he calls communal religion, which is characterized as a pattern of action solemnizing major milestones in a person's life, such as birth, puberty, marriage, and death, as well as the celebratory rituals, benedictions, blessings, and other such social and ritualistic practices. A major purpose of communal religion is the structured ordering of society. Now, in the Western Abrahamic traditions, Judaism might be arguably called such a communal religion. In the Indian context, Hinduism, with its caste system and the very clearly demarcated 4 stages of life, has had a very communal orientation as codified in the Brahmanical law books. Now, for instance, an example of this, marriage. That marriage occupies a huge, important position among its 16 sacred rites, after which one is seen as fully entering into the householder stage of life. Now, the Buddha, apparently, couldn't have cared less about marriage. Remember, he renounced he left his wife, and in fact saw marriage and all other aspects of householder society as something to be left behind and having nothing to do with liberation. In fact, there are many passages where the householder life is described as an obstacle to liberation. And for much of its history, in fact, Buddhism had no such rite as a wedding ceremony. Now, over time, such ceremonies were created in order to answer to the need of the laity. Zen Buddhism, arising in China and then spreading to Korea, Vietnam, and finally to Japan, has a much more this world orientation than early Buddhism. And Zen emphasizes awakening in ordinary life. Now, one may have the mountain peak experience of awakening, but then it's expected that you come back down off the mountain and re-enter again into the marketplace, obviously forever changed by the awakening. Now, I teach an approach to Zen Buddhism that I call Zen Naturalism. And it's a Buddhist approach to the ever-growing movement of naturalistic religion. Zen Naturalism is based upon the teachings and practices of Zen Buddhism. As an authentic child of yoga and Buddhism, Zen Naturalism too is soteriological. Liberation is the purpose of practice. But in keeping with its naturalistic worldview, liberation is not understood as an entry into some transcendent realm of existence, nor is it understood as the cessation of rebirth or reincarnation. The liberation that Zen Naturalism offers is a liberation from unconsciously conditioned patterns of thinking and behavior, as well as from impulsive reactivity and the attachment to self-conceit and identity. Zen Naturalism is not the world-weary attempt to leave the world altogether that is found in early traditional Buddhism and classical yoga, for instance. Importantly, as a movement that does not reject the world, Zen Naturalism is also a communal religion that celebrates life in community as part of society. And as such, it calls for its practitioners to engage actively in attempting to better life and the world for all beings. And the rituals of celebration are designed to create meaningful relations among the community and the ever-expanding relations with all of society. Zen Naturalism does not feel any need to seek meaning and validity in any transcendental realm. As my teacher, Samu Sinim, would often repeat, it is found in just this, just here, and just now. Remember, please, in order to support Pobsa's Dharma Lounge, subscribe, write reviews, comments, share it with others, and the Dana button is linked below, and anything is gratefully appreciated. Thank you.